Alright, finally made it up where it's a bit of a view, and I'm up on the Duffy Highway. I'm right near Duffy Lake, and actually around the I flew the drone up there and to get some wicked cool video footage to show everybody in the planet what it's like right here in the backyard. And as we're driving home, I noticed a huge snow avalanche had come down off the top of those mountains and skidded across the lake. So I found a spot to pull over and I flew the drone over top of it. And it's crazy how frickin' big it is. You can't really tell without standing next to it, but I'll show you a piece of video footage here from it. And it was the control set is still 114 feet in the air, videotaping it from this height. So you can imagine how high that pile of snow is. Crazy. The amount of power it took and the amount of snow that came down that mountain is amazing. And I couldn't imagine what it'd be like to be, say as an example, cross-country skiing around that lake and get caught in that. Ooh, that would be really, really bad. Anyway, I got a time. I'm going to share, actually snail mail. This is mail to me from somebody who actually lives basically in the same road I used to live on for years on Vancouver Island, out in an area called Machosen. And I think they left their name out, which is fine. Wanted me to. I read it through, skimmed through it once, and they also sent me a frickin' gift. Check this out. It's called the Sportsman Pocket Chainsaw. And you know who you are. Thank you very much for that. It's really cool. And maybe I'll try it out and we'll videotape it in a little bit. The pocket chainsaw. Looks like one of those straps you go back and forth. It could prove to be quite handy for all the stuff that I do, right? What a kind move. But I'll whip that out and we'll give it a go on video here in a bit. But I'll tell you, I'm in so much snow right now, it's really tough to get off the road anywhere. I just walked out 15 yards and I'm sinking up to my knees. So here is a snail mailed in experience to share with all you. This very kind, generous person from Vancouver Island. Alright, and listen to this one. Dear Steve, the details of this encounter with a Sasquatch happened to my grandfather. I'll leave his name out. Around 1920, up in the area around Prince George, BC. Here's a bit of family history to set this incident up. For me, my family history starts in Nova Scotia, where my grandfather settled after he and my grandmother moved here from Vancouver around 1922. He enlisted in the army during World War I and spent 44 months on the front lines of France as a sapper, also called pioneer or combat engineer, who is a combatant or soldier who performs a variety of military engineering duties such as breaching fortifications, demolitions, bridge building, and trench construction engineer. He was involved in many famous Canadian battles, from Vimy Ridge, Ypres to Passchendaele, and others. Ypres, Y-P-R-E-S. Needless to say, upon his return, he was a changed man who suffered from shell shock, or what we now refer to today as PTSD. When his memories and flashbacks of war got too much for him to deal with, he would head out for a week or so hunting and or fishing by himself to sort things out. On this particular trip, he took in the autumn of 1920. He went up to an area around Prince George. On his second night there, he was awakened by the sounds of his camping equipment being thrown around in his camp area. He emerged from his tent, clad only in his one-piece long johns, boots, and rifle. In the light of the moon, he observed his gear destroyed and strewn about his camping area. At first he thought it may have been a bear that caused this mess, but thought the destruction was too much for a bear to have done in the short time in which he had heard the commotion take place. He heard a deep guttural growl behind him, and turned with his rifle raised, expecting to encounter and likely to have to shoot a bear. From the sound of it, a big one at that. Instead, illuminated by the light of the moon, he was met with what he described was an absolute giant of a man, estimated to have been standing 8 to 10 feet tall, with a huge head on massive broad shoulders with no neck to speak of, covered in low flowing hair which was blowing in the breeze as he stood about 30 or so feet away. As this giant stood there, his breath could be seen in the air as he made deep guttural growls, and he began to clench and open his fists in what appeared to be a growing rage. After his experiences in the war, Granddad didn't get fazed by too much, but this encounter left him frozen in fear and disbelief as to what he was seeing. All he could muster in a way of communication was to say, "I won't shoot, just leave me and don't kill me." With that, the giant took several steps slowly backwards, turned while looking over his shoulder, and disappeared into the woods. Granddad took less than 5 minutes to gather the items he most needed, got into his truck, left everything else where it laid, and sped off out of the area. I guess Granddad learned that the First Nation people's accounts of these creatures going back many generations weren't just campfire stories after all. This was the last time my grandfather ever went hunting or camping in the woods until the day he died, which is very sad. He related his story only once or twice to my father in the 1950s when my dad was in his 30s, so the details are, for the most part, sparse, condensed, and basically only the highlights were related. I guess he needed to relate this incident to someone he knew would believe and not judge him before it died with him. The experience must have shook him to his core as he moved the family from Vancouver to Nova Scotia, perhaps looking at it now in an attempt to put as much distance as he could between him and what happened. No doubt. Could you imagine having that happen back then? The lack of communication and the lack of, truth being shared, except amongst maybe people in tiny communities possibly. And to have to suffer that sentence on top of the PTSD he suffered from the World War I. What a shit eater. That's really sad. My father wasn't one to tell stories or embellish the details of incidents he experienced either. That is how my grandfather raised him, as his traumatic life experiences left him with no time for bullshit or fairy tales. Like they say, the truth is easy to remember. My father served during World War II in the Merchant Navy on protection escorts for ships sailing to England carrying troops and supplies for the war effort. My grandfather died shortly after I was born in 1960, but from all accounts, he was a man's man, as was my father. My father never told me any stories which I ever believed were not 100% truthful, and those who knew my grandfather said the same of him. As for myself, I was a municipal policeman for nearly 6 years, a military policeman for 10 years, and a BC corrections officer for a total of nearly 26 years. I've spent 40 plus years in the field of law enforcement. I like to think I know what is and isn't BS when I hear it, and I've kept this story to myself, like Dad and Granddad, for fear what others may think of the three of us. Because as you know, anyone without first-hand experience or knows someone close to them who has had an encounter of this nature neither understands, believes, or can't resist the temptation to ridicule and undermine you for their own amusement or personal gain at your expense. If not for your YouTube channel content, I would likely have kept the details of this matter to myself as well, but I feel this encounter needs to be told so as it isn't, in my opinion, one of the many credible encounters which gets lost or forgotten about because no one wants to be ridiculed and believed to be crazy or a bullshitter, and have their credibility put into question. Back then and now, the phrase, "you're only as good as your word," still rings loud, strong, and true, and few are willing to have their integrity or reputation called into question over something which sounds too fanciful to have happened. I wish Granddad had related more in-depth details of his encounter to my father, which he could have then eventually had told to me. I was told of this incident by my father when I was home on leave, and told him I was being posted to Vancouver Round, CFB Esquimalt. Actually, that's where I grew up, in Esquimalt, when I was a boy. He said he wanted me to be aware these things do exist in the event that I should ever be in the woods during the course of military duties or for some other reason. I have had interest in topics of this nature for years now, and I know where his interest came from as well. I only wish he had related Granddad's encounter with me years ago and had not waited as long as he did. The fear of ridicule is a powerful deterrent for many, me included, to keep some things to themselves. As for the camping survival tool I sent you, you should wish to recommend it to your YouTube followers. I found it while surfing on the American Amazon site. It is carried by Sportsman Industries and is referred to as a pocket chainsaw. I thought you may find it useful given your time spent in the woods. I wish I had one while on various exercises in the military. A big thank you to you for being a safe and trusted arena for people to relate these encounters, which need to be told and not lost to the passing of time. I wish you safe and memorable treks in your quest for hunting enjoyment and spreading the knowledge of truth of this. All but dismissed. I wish you safe and memorable treks in your quest for hunting enjoyment and spreading the knowledge and truth of this all but dismissed reality of Sasquatch existence. Yours truly. Withhold the name and address. No problem, man. Gotcha. Thank you so much for that informative experience passed down from your grandfather. All three of you are definitely of good blood DNA lineage stock. Brave men, brave genes, and thanks for your service that you have given to the public. We very appreciate it. But there you go. All right, he's just like my grandfather. I was 26 when he broke down, not break down, but I was 26 when he finally told me. And he wasn't going to tell me. If I told him I didn't believe in these beings, he wasn't going to say shit. And he probably would have just carried that secret to the grave. And I know my grandfather, he told my grandmother about it. And I think my grandmother, she's passed away now too. They used to go all up and down Vancouver Island. He was friends with Alec Merriam. He was the author of all those how to catch shellfish, how to everything books on Vancouver Island years ago. My grandpa used to hang out with him and fish with him and camp with him, and my grandmother. And they saw a lot of remote places. So, but I do understand my grandmother saw one of these beings as well. But I think that story didn't get really hammered home. But I know his did when he looked me in the eye and told me everything. But it's too bad. It's such a weird common human trait, isn't it? Being scared of the herd, the rest of the herd. It's such a bizarre thing to witness and sit back and watch while you're not taking part of it, right? It's a weird trait. I wonder who instilled it into the human herd to make it so normal, more common than not, for us to be scared of each other and what each other thinks and to be laughed at and ridiculed. What a funny thing to be. It's a funny thing for me to see as something to be terrified of in this lifetime. When, perhaps maybe it's because I've faced many other things that do deserve to be terrified of, not only Sasquatch beings, but maybe being in storms at sea, or grizzly, facing most of the grizzly bear, a lot of hair-raising, life-threatening grizzly bear experiences I've had, all sorts of different things. There's a lot of things that we should be terrified of, and I just don't understand why we're terrified of each other. It just doesn't make sense to me. But I guess that's how a lot of people gain and maintain control, right? If you haven't seen what's going on mainstream lately, it's pretty freaking alarming. But anyway, this is a beautiful backdrop. I might have to come up here again soon and do a little marathon and share as many emails as I can, because I've been taking some time away training horses right now daily, and trying to get other items done, and trying not to give so much time to doing this, although I will continue to do it. But anyway, thanks again for sending that email. Thank you so much for sending that gift. What a kind gesture. And I will try it out on the way home. If I can get close to where there's some deadfall, we'll pull it out of the box and give her a rip and see what it does. And but anyway, this is a beautiful area right here. And not really coincidentally, but as per the norm, I think right off the top of my brain, how many Sasquatch encounters have I had directly told to me from people who saw these things, who I know, just from Permanent Whistler. There's a drain right there. Van Horlick, head of Van Horlick, there's been one. Just to the right of the head of Van Horlick, there was two more. end of Duffy Lake in these trees right here. One got up in front of a guy known as Grandfather Fishing right there behind me. I've seen Sasquatch tracks all the way down Duffy Lake on the far side one time in the snow and ice. What else? There was another one reported somebody driving along this highway right here. How one went ripping across the frickin' highway with a mountain goat under its arm. So I guess it bagged a mountain goat, right? Then as you get farther south to the top of Joffrey, you know, there's some First Nations friend of mine from Mount Currie. He ran into one right there, looked square in the face of it from 10 feet away. He doesn't go near Joffrey anymore, he told me. I know of 9 people that camped at Joffrey Lakes. They saw one come up and over top of the ice field and drop down in the evening. And they all felt they couldn't sleep, felt stared at during the night. A buddy of mine on the cross the other side from the highway, Joffrey, ran into one deer hunting up in the timber on the top of that, the logging slash cut right there. There's been numerous sightings of tracks going across the switchbacks, the bottom of the Duffy right here below me. What else? Search and rescue people from Whistler. We're at the Wendy Thompson hut, which is just a little bit south of me and up these mountains on the side, and found 17-inch long footprints with a 6-foot stride that sunk in the snow 3 times their depth, going downhill in the wintertime from up in the Alpine. Go figure. Weird shit, right? And that's just a handful off the top of my brain I can rattle off to you guys right now about where I'm standing right here today. It's an interesting topic. It's real, it's true. The facts are not made up, and it is absolute honest truth of what's going on around us in these mountains, from coast to coast. And there's nothing anybody can do about it to make it go away. It's not going to, and that is why we're sharing this information with each other. And just like the original writer of this encounter today said, his father wanted to pass on those facts to him so he'd have that knowledge that these beings are running around in case he's on maneuvers out in the wilds of Canada while he was in the forests. You guys pick up that part that he wrote in his story, right? So take note of that. The only way true knowledge is going to get out there and get shared is if all of you start teaching the children. That's where the change starts. That's where it starts, okay? We have to start educating the children honestly, and that's all there is to it. We got no choice. Quit lying, quit hiding. Get your head out of that hole in the sand and start talking out loud and honestly and matter of fact, and share the honest details that you're learning from all these thousands of people sharing here today. It's very, very, very important, all right? But anyway, it's time to go. Got a roast chicken in the oven, and it's time to go eat that sucker. Talk to you guys later. Be safe out there. On 5 rounds. And they're up on this real big mountain, big face. And it's open willow all around us. Well, I just shot every bullet I had, 300 yards. Obviously my gun's out. It really sucks since this gun hasn't been out in a while. That really sucks bad. Scope myself to boot.